Very much, Elisa. Thank you, Elisa.
You're welcome.
So, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
That song that I picked to start off this talk today is a wonderful, wonderful example of fourth dimensional thinking. But right now, let's start where we are. And where we are today is we're in third dimension. That's where we are. This is 3D, third dimension. Many of you may remember going to the theater eons ago, and they gave you these little glasses. And you sat in there, and the movie came on, and you looked through these little glasses, and it was like that whatever was up there, animals and everything were coming right at you. Some of you remember that, right? Well, that was an example of 3D. It was kind of, letting you see what 3D really was. Of course, Charles Fillmore says that in order to fully understand 3D, you have to know that there's also a fourth dimension. And of course, there are many other dimensions. There's 12 altogether. And after our potluck this afternoon, I'll be teaching a workshop, which we will be reviewing all of those dimensions and why we might want to know about them. But for this talk this morning, we're going to talk pretty much about third and fourth dimension. And third dimension, which we're living in right now, is the only one of all of the dimensions that has form. In other words, you have a body here. The other 11 dimensions, you're in some other kind of form, spiritual and a whole bunch of other things. But this is the only dimension where we actually physically have form. And as such, we can manifest things in this dimension. And the fourth dimension is where all of those ideas, all of those things were originated. So in fourth dimension, the ideas are there, and the ideas in fourth dimension are exactly what they are here. They're polarity. There's everything in there. Everything is there. But they don't have any form, so they precipitate down into the third dimension where when you're here, they can have form. So you have form. The idea of you as a child of God in God's mind takes a form this time. Where in fourth dimension, you're just an idea. Well, I don't want to say just an idea because ideas are important. You're an idea, but here we take form. So it's a different dimension, and all the dimensions are like that. They have different things that go on in them. And so in the third dimension, you have form. And as form, you can manifest things, ideas that were formed in fourth dimension. Now, fourth dimension is exactly the same as it is here. Here we have polarities. And we see that all around us. We see polarities. One idea comes up, an opposing idea comes up. There's always that opposing idea. You can see that in political parties. You can see that in dress. You can see that in organizations. I am a massage therapist. I don't massage anymore, but when I was doing that. And we had the American Massage Therapy Association, which had been in existence since 1940 sometime, And then all of a sudden, here comes this other organization, the American Body Workers or something, And when polarities come up, then, you're faced with choice, and really oftentimes in things like that where you want to join an organization, you have to then look at everything and see what's for you and so on. So we have polarities here all the time. It's kind of a natural thing. It's pretty hard to think of just something that doesn't have something that's either in opposition to it, very seldom, mostly in opposition to it, or has a different approach or whatever like that. So there are many, many ideas, and that's kind of what happens in third dimension. The wonderful thing about being in third dimension is we do have the ability to manifest everything and anything that we need, and we know that from our unity principles. I just love that hymn we sang this morning, God Will Take Care of Us. It's so true. It's just so true. And that is true for us in all places, in all times, in all dimensions. Because we don't really always necessarily stay on the third dimension. We may travel, perhaps in our sleep, to another dimension. We may recall times when we have spent times in another dimension. I absolutely know that I've spent a lot of time in the second dimension because those of you who know me know how much I love stones and crystals and rocks and all their healing abilities and everything. And they are in the second dimension. So I'm pretty sure I spent a lot of time there living in the second dimension and getting to know, especially crystals. I've always been fascinated by them. So I know for sure I've spent time in the second dimension just by who I am now and what I'm doing now in my life. So how many people have this book? This is a Unity book. How many people have this book? Okay, so in this book is a whole chapter on the fourth dimension. How many people have read that chapter? Now, I'm not going to stand up here this morning and tell you that that's an easy chapter to read. It's kind of hard. So I'm going to do my best today to talk to you a little bit about it and see why it's important and why we need to know about really all the dimensions. So I want to just read a little bit from that Charles Fillmore wrote in here for you to kind of get us going. All who enter the realm of elements, back of form, back in the realm of new elements, new things, and new ideas, immediately step out of their confinement in three-dimensional form and include in their nature the freedom of the fourth. So this, just to start off with, is why Charles Fillmore says it's important to know about the fourth dimension. Because the fourth dimension is all this realm of all these ideas, both polarities, so you get to choose which idea you want to manifest. And of course, as your consciousness grows, you choose to manifest your good, not other things, even though sometimes other things kind of sneak in anyway. But that's a matter of consciousness. That's a matter of us knowing enough about ourselves that we can manifest what is good for us in this realm. So what he's saying here is there's a lot of freedom in knowing about all of these ideas and everything that are contained in the fourth dimension. Now, we can live just in the third dimension. We don't even have to know about that or think about it, but it's limiting. It limits us because we don't know all of that good that God has for us. So as we raise our consciousness and come into awareness of all of these ideas and all these things that are contained in other dimensions, especially the fourth, we can then manifest more in our lives. We can work on doing it even better for ourselves. As we continue this process, we liberate ourselves more and more, for we feel the increased ability through the greater magnitude of the fourth dimensional field, even to consider new powers and new possibilities with respect to any situation, condition, or thing, is to start immediately the expansion of your nature and your ability in the fourth dimension state. So what Charles is saying here is we need to be aware of that this dimension exists, aware of what it's comprised of, aware of these ideas. Now, when I was reading this, I said, well, how did he know about that? How did he know about that? Well, of course, it's just a guess on my part, but I'm pretty willing to bet because he was a great meditator, that he was led to this divine mind when he was meditating, because he always went to Source directly. He believed right from the very beginning when he saw his wife, Myrtle, healed, that he wanted to go to Source and find out everything. That was the way he was. He went directly to Source. Source was going to tell you the truth. Source wasn't going to lie to you or, tell you something different or whatever. Source was the way to go. So I'm sure he came into an awareness of fourth dimension through his meditation, which of course is what we want to do too. We want to meditate. And when we open ourselves in meditation, when we're in a state of meditation, as frequently as we can do it, those divine ideas do come down into your head. Now, you may, I'm sure all of us in this room have had that experience of having some idea come into our head that we have absolutely, where'd that come from? You have that feeling like, where'd that thought come from? And you know it's absolutely not your thought, but that is a divine thought. I've said this before in talks because it was an awesome spiritual experience of my life. And I, at the time, was attending a Baptist service with my husband, and we were in, my ex-husband now, and we were in the choir there. And it was just getting to be too much for me. You know, the minister, he was just, to me, kind of depressing, and he was always talking about the things we did wrong, you know, and how you had to confess this in your soul and all this stuff. And that day, I was just sitting there, and I thought to myself, you know, it's, what is it, 10:30 in the morning? I don't think I've done anything wrong yet today, you know? And I really didn't think I had, you know? And so then I kind of closed my eyes and everything, and then this thought, which I so recognized that day was not my thought came into my head, and it said, there's no such thing as sin. And that's all this guy ever talked about was sin, you know? And that day I went home and I said to my husband, my sons were 1 and 3 at the time, and they were in Sunday school, and I was disturbed about some of, you know, what was going on there too. I didn't think it was, you know, me or how I wanted them to be. And I said, I don't want to go to church anymore. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I think we should go camping. I think we have a camper, go maybe once a month or something. I think we should go every week. We should put it on a permanent site up in Maine sometime. And then when we're on the beach and we see a beautiful shell, we tell the kids God made that. And that's what we did. I never thought about looking around for a church because truthfully at that time I thought they were all the same, you know. And it would be years before unity came into my life. Many years before unity came into my life. But I at least knew that I didn't want any more programming. No more programming, you know. No more programming for Arlene. So anyway, that thought is an example of a fourth dimensional divine idea that comes into your mind when you're quiet and listening for something different. So Charles, in this chapter, urges us to focus our attention on the fourth dimension, to meditate as much as we can, to allow those divine ideas to come in and then act on them and manifest them in our lives. And sometimes, of course, it takes a long time to manifest. I couldn't manifest unity at that time in my life because I didn't even know that it existed. But I could be open to something different. I could say, this is not what I want. Show me another way. And in God's time, which isn't always our time, but in God's time, it comes to us. Because God will take care of us, just as that song said. So, the other thing that I wanted to talk about the fourth dimension is it does, in the fourth dimension, have the same polarity ideas that are here. So we still have free will to choose that. It's not that everything in the fourth dimension is still all good, you know. It's a realm of ideas, period. Every idea, all ideas are collected there. So that's another reason to stay on the high side of that and to be aware of your consciousness and where your consciousness is going to take you, to be on the high side of that thing. So you decide where you focus your attention. That still holds true in fourth dimension as well as in third dimension. So the other thing that I did want to read to you from this book is, he says this: when we unfold our fourth dimensional consciousness, we shall see into the omnipresence, and there will be nothing hidden from us. Nothing. When we refine and spiritualize our consciousness and the temple, and through which it finds expression, we shall be able to think of the most distant point in the universe and immediately be there. There is no time or space to one who has unfolded the Christ consciousness to the degree that Jesus had. In the Bible, I'm not sure where, because I'm not one of those persons who remembers all those dates and everything, or where. But I loved this. This was always something I remembered from my growing up a child in the Methodist churches. There was a thing that said, greater works will you do. That's what Jesus said, greater works will you do. And the fourth dimension is that greater works. And I used to think when I was in Sunday school, I used to think, well, what did that mean? What greater works could we do? I didn't have any idea about it, But I think now we have an idea about it. One thing that gives us that idea is we see what's wrong in our world. We see strife and conflict and war and suffering. And so we can see that. But we can also see other things, like the ability to just be in another place by putting ourselves there with our mind. I actually had a thing that happened to me like that one time. I was parked at the light at Chandler and Park Avenue. And anybody that's been there knows what a long light that is, And in front of me was this truck, and it had these ladders on it, these ladders. And I kind of must have just like phased out a little, how you do sometimes, you're waiting there. And all of a sudden, I had this thought come into my mind that ladder was totally obsolete, that we could get any place we wanted to just by being there. So that's the divine thought that came in my mind. And I was actually laughing because I was with that thought. Do you know what I'm saying? I was with that thought. So then that looked up silly to me. And I was actually laughing as I was with that thought. Because who needs a ladder? You could just be there, See? Who needs a ladder? We can just be there. That was the thought that came into my mind. So, these are the kind of possibilities that exist on fourth dimension. As he said, and I said earlier, they're unlimited. You can't even possibly imagine all of them. But you can open yourself to that and feel that that is what you want to have happen, that you want these divine ideas, you want that expression, you want to grow in consciousness, and that you're open to any of these divine ideas, any of them. So let's right now go into meditation.
Can I just comment that it seems to me that you're describing an allegory world where anything can be manifest without form. It just isn't like all ideas. It's like an allegory. All versions of.
Well, he did call the fourth dimension the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it, and a lot of other things, the kingdom of God. Yeah.
Allegory world.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into meditation now.